Hi friends, I'm back with another dream that I wanted to share with you. This one came to me in February of 2020, February 27th, 2020. In this dream, Donald Trump was coming to visit my Oxford, Ohio home to speak to a small gathering. And I asked the female aide that was traveling with him if there was anything that he needed, and she asked for an ashtray of all things. I didn't think we had one because we never let anybody smoke in our home, but we actually found two. We set up a small card table in the center of our foyer. Trump was now seated, and I noticed he wore a light gray suit. He had a large wall mirror behind him, and he faced the front door. We laid the two ashtrays on the table, but he never used them. While typing this up, I heard the song Ring Around a Rosy. Pocket full of posies, ashes, ashes, we all fall down. That's what came to mind when I was typing this up. We had guests in chairs off to Trump's right in the living room. I sat behind a man in an olive green khaki coat with a hood over his head. I was positioned in front of our china cabinet, which is what I have right here behind me. Although it was hard for me to see Trump, I was content to be in that spot. I knew there were several others behind me that couldn't see him at all. But then Trump called out my name, and I found myself in a chair right in front of him and to his right. I had no idea of his purpose or message other than simply making contact with his supporters. Next, he was sitting in our kitchen that was painted in red and yellow gold. There was cabinets on both sides of the room, and Trump sat in the middle towards the back of the kitchen, facing the wide opening to a large room full of seated people. I was looking for a mug with which to serve him coffee, and in the cabinet to Trump's left, I found several with pagan symbols. This was alarming to me, and I never managed to serve that coffee. Okay, so there were three things that Jehovah God showed me regarding COVID in this dream. At the time, I really wasn't paying that much attention to COVID. It really hadn't gotten to be a big thing. In late February, it was beginning to become more talked about in the news. But the first thing that this dream brought to my attention was that the dream originated in China. Nobody was certain of that at the time, but in my dream, I felt like the Father made that clear to me. The second thing that God showed me was that the COVID would be called a pandemic, and it would be likened to the Black Plague. That actually happened after, I believe it was after March, is when people, actually it was in March that Trump began calling it the China virus, and it was well after that that people were likening it to a plague. It had not a plague. It had not been called a pandemic as of the time I had the dream. And the third thing that was highlighted to me by God was that there was a problem with those serving in Trump's cabinet, or you could call it task force or whatever, the people that were, so to speak, in his kitchen that were helping him with this pandemic. So now we know that there's a 99.9% recovery rate. It was a very bad flu, and some people had some bad reactions to it, but we now know that if people had been given proper medications and proper treatments without ventilation, that this flu would not have been so lethal, and that the jab is actually causing more problems. And then the person that was a problem in Trump's kitchen turned out to be Fauci and Birx, and there's a lot of information coming out. I know Robert Kennedy Jr. wrote a book. I read it from cover to cover, and it was very, very well done, very well documented to point out the problems with Fauci. So I just wanted to share that if anybody had any concerns about Trump calling it the China virus, or the way he handled it. I think that God was warning me anyway to just trust the Father, that he sees what's going on. And I will let you guys ponder the rest of it. I just wanted to share that, to give some information about some of the dreams I've been having about Trump, and how the Father's assuring me that he chose Trump for such a time as this, and that none of this was a surprise to the Father. So I hope that brings some encouragement, or maybe some enlightenment, or maybe you have some comments that you want to put in the bottom that you picked up on some interpretation of this dream that I'm missing. So your comments are all welcome, and I would just want to speak God's blessing over you today.